Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Last night, this programme revealed how the Conservative Party failed to declare tens of thousands of pounds spent campaigning in key marginal seats in last year's general election. Today, David Cameron weighed in, admitting an error that meant that costs of the so-called volunteer battle bus campaign were not declared. But he insisted the volunteers were campaigning for the party, not for the local candidates. So the costs didn't need to be declared on local spending returns. Tonight, we reveal new evidence that challenges that claim. We've looked at the 20 key Labour marginal seats in the Midlands and the North targeted by that battle bus tour and found documents and photographs suggesting they were campaigning for local candidates. Our political correspondent, Michael Crick, has this report.
Last night we revealed, and the Tories even admitted, more undeclared expenses from last year's election.
Come to an absolutely great seat. This is one of the 23 we need to win.
We showed how Conservative HQ bussed dozens of activists to the southwest, wiping out the Liberal Democrats there. Conservative headquarters says that Battle Bus was part of a national campaign and therefore should go onto their national expenses, that it was to promote the party as a whole, not individual candidates in the constituencies. But we found evidence which would seem to contradict those claims. And the law says that any costs of local campaigning must be declared by the candidates themselves. In recent weeks, we've also exposed tens of thousands of pounds of Tory expenses, which seem not to have been properly declared in 3 by-elections in 2014 and in South Thanet last year in the general election. Tonight, we're in the Midlands and the North, where traditionally it's Labour against Tory. Here, 3 more battle buses visited 20 marginal seats over a 10-day period, and the Tories won 17 of them. Tonight, we reveal tens of thousands more of election expenses, including hotel costs in Tamworth and Bolton, which we can't find declared anywhere. While the battle bus we featured last night went to the southwest, other buses toured the Midlands and North. The Midlands were crucial. The Tories had to hold several constituencies here to have any chance of winning the election. The Midlands battle bus visited 10 seats in the final 10 days. Here again we have found evidence of volunteers campaigning for specific candidates. And the Tories admit battle bus costs were not listed on the local spending returns at the time. Here in the constituency of Amber Valley in Derbyshire, the Conservative MP was spending a majority of just over 500 votes, making it one of the most marginal seats in the whole country. And the Conservative battle bus came here on Saturday the 2nd of May, just 5 days before polling.
I'm on the bus.
Meet Theodora Dickinson, one of the volunteers on the Midlands bus. During the campaign, photos of her by fellow activists were put online, which highlight her work. Here she's on a doorstep with the local candidate's leaflet. Some of her colleagues posted tweets suggesting they too were doing local campaigning. One activist wrote,
1,300 voters talked to on the doorstep in Amber Valley today, for Nigel Mills.
Another wrote,
nice homes in the beautiful Amber Valley. Great reaction on the doorsteps in support of Nigel Mills.
All these photos and comments suggest these volunteers were campaigning for the local Conservative candidate. By law, all spending on a local campaign must be declared by the candidate, and the amount is strictly capped, usually between £12,000 and £15,000. This is the official declaration of local spending which the Conservatives submitted here to the council in Amber Valley about 3 weeks after the election result, together with various receipts. Nowhere does it seem in these documents is there any mention of the battle bus. Nowhere does it seem is there any mention of that hotel in Tamworth, the Travelodge, where all the activists stayed. Nor was the hotel included on the Conservatives' declaration of national expenditure. The legal spending limit in Amber Valley was nearly £15,000. Nigel Mills spent just under £14,000. Had the cost of the bus and hotels been included, however, then we reckon the local spending cap would seemingly have been exceeded by almost £1,000. We showed much of our evidence to the local Labour leader. What do you make of those?
Well, I think I don't recognise any of the people on that, so I think it's quite clear that the Conservative Party were bussing in people to campaign on behalf of Nigel Mills, who actually didn't live in Amber Valley. The evidence you produced clearly shows that these people were using as part of a local campaign, and in reality should have been on the local expenses submitted by Nigel Mills.
But doesn't Labour do this sort of thing as well? Organise for people to come around the country and campaign for your candidate?
Oh, I wish I had it, or we might have saved Amber Valley.
It seems Battle Bus volunteers did local campaign work in other Midland seats too. Here's Theodora Dickinson again in Wolverhampton South West, although there's no suggestion she and all the other activists are not doing anything they weren't told to do. And in Sherwood, more activists and more candidate leaflets, which quote him saying, "I called by today with my local team to hear your views." The day before polling, Battle Bus visited Dudley South in the West Midlands, a seat the Tories were defending. Here's a bus leader and two activists wearing rosettes for the candidate Mike Wood. Battle Bus organisers later wrote to volunteers to thank them. The letter quotes Wood, now an MP, saying of the Battle Bus trip,
"It made a big difference. In every one of the 3 wards in Dudley South where Battle Bus campaigned on Wednesday morning, turnout was at least 10% higher than any of the other 3 wards. None of that would have happened without all the fantastic activists on the Battle Bus who came to help me the day before the election."
Note his use of the words "help me." The letter also says,
"We are immensely grateful to Lord Feldman for agreeing to fund Battle Bus 2015.
We find a similar story in the northwest. 2 small buses went to 5 seats each in 5 days, with volunteers staying 5 nights at a Holiday Inn. In Morecambe and Loonsdale, activists also tweeted photos in which they seemed to brandish local leaflets promoting a particular candidate. The buses were central to the Conservatives' 40-40 strategy. Defend 40 seats of their own, take 40 of their opponents.
The Conservative Party has been losing members for decades now. By the time of the 2015 election, probably it had around 150,000 members, but our research shows that probably only about 5 to 10% of those actually do any work for the party between elections. A few more at elections, but that's really not enough for the boots on the ground that you need to actually do the voter identification and getting people out to vote. And that's why Battle Bus was so important.
Once more, the costs of the buses and hotels for volunteers weren't declared in any local spending returns. In these 2 regions, the party spent £24,000 on buses and £23,000 on accommodation. By our reckoning, if these sums were split across all 20 constituencies Battle Bus visited, it would have added more than £2,000 in costs to each seat. That means 16 seats could have exceeded the spending cap. The rules on election spending exist to ensure a level playing field between parties. But the candidates in the seats Battle Bus visited have all told us their spending kept within the law. Tory HQ says Battle Bus was all national campaigning. But was it? We've obtained these emails and other documents prepared by Conservative Central Office, which seem to show that Battle Bus volunteers were helped to fight for local candidates as well as the National Party. Just before the Battle Buses set off for the marginal seats, Paul Abbott, the Chief of Staff to the then co-chairman Grant Shapps, sent out detailed emails with specific information about each seat. For example, volunteers were told that in Broxtowe, the local Tory MP Anna Soubry had secured compensation for local voters affected by a tram route. And in Cannock Chase, they were told that the candidate was fighting to secure the return of the number 32 bus route.
Today, David Cameron responded. He said his party had made an error on its expenses, which they'll rectify with the Electoral Commission. The Tories won't say, though, if that error also includes the huge extra costs we've previously identified in South Thanet and the 3 by-elections. And was it really error or deliberate? The Electoral Commission has much to investigate, and maybe the police too.
20 empty chairs. We did invite every one of the Conservative candidates in those 20 constituencies to be interviewed today. 17 of them are now MPs. Here are the chairs. We've put them aside for them, but not one of those people was available. They all issued the same statement. My election agent made a return of my election expenses as required by law. The party's national bus tour was authorised and paid for by Conservative headquarters. It was intended to promote the party's success in the general election and did not form any part of my local election expenses. And strangely enough, one other empty chair, not one of the many senior Labour Party figures we approached, was prepared to be interviewed either. One man who is prepared to fill a chair is indeed Michael Crick. Michael Crick, what else has happened in the course of the day?
Well, as I said earlier, the Prime Minister's been brought into the fray on this now. He was interviewed by BBC Radio Cornwall, and this is what David Cameron said.
I think all parties have had these battle buses over the years, and they don't just go around doing nothing. They go around and they campaign across the country, and it's a national expense and should be nationally declared. And obviously the party's made an error in its declaration, which it needs to put right.
No, I don't actually think David Cameron's correct there. The traditional kind of battle buses, you've probably been on one, which ferried party leaders around the country with a whole load of journalists. That's one thing. This was very different. These were 4 battle buses for volunteers, paid for and organised by the central party to go around the country, their hotels paid for, and their other costs. And it's quite clear from the evidence we've gathered, leaflets and tweets and blogs and photographs and briefing documents, that they were, in many cases, campaigning for specific local candidates, in which case those costs should be added to the expense returns of those candidates.
And the very fact that they needed a hotel room suggests they were on the ground doing something more than just the national election.
Indeed. And today, one of the people we featured last night, Scott Mann, now the MP for North Cornwall, was interviewed by ITV West Country on this. This is what he said.
And this exposure that was broadcast last night is kind of part of a series of allegations that actually the Conservative Party, during the general election campaign, didn't comply with the rules. Okay. And you're sort of dismissing that tonight as though it doesn't really matter.
On your report, it said that the activists stayed in Eden. That's not even in my electoral division, you know, in my constituency.
But were they campaigning for you?
They came down to do some work for me, but they did some campaigning right across the whole of the South West.
Did you read the details of how you should declare your election expenses?
Yeah, and it was clear from the Channel 4 report that Central Office had said specifically that they were meeting the costs of the accommodation and we were meeting the costs of the leaflet distribution.
Now, what's interesting about that interview is Mr. Mann there admits the activists came in to work for him and that he supplied them with his local leaflets. The fact they stayed in a hotel outside the constituency is irrelevant. They were there to work for him, and therefore, many experts would argue the costs of that operation should be on his local expenses. He seems to have shot himself in the foot a bit there.
Michael Crick, now...